What's up? It's Duke DeLate for the Intimacy Liberation Army, and today we're talking about the 10 signs that you lack self-awareness in your relationships. This is the probably video 8, I think, of our self-awareness series. In here, we're going to discover the top signs you lack self-awareness in your relationships, how to identify the patterns, improve your emotional intelligence, and build healthier, more fulfilling connections. If you've ever gotten stuck, disconnected, or full of unnecessary conflict in your relationship, the answer might be a little bit closer than you think. It is the lack of self-awareness in your relationship. So many of us, especially if we come from an attachment theory and both ends of the spectrum, are looking to the partner to see what's going on. And how we should act and how we should interact. And the more self-aware you are, kind of where your values, your belief systems, and everything that drives you to have the relationship, the better you are in having agency or control over your behaviors in the relationship. So self-awareness is the foundation of a healthy relationship. The relationships that grow and thrive rather than ones who just kind of maintain and cope. And it helps you understand how your thoughts, how your emotions, how your behaviors impact other people. It impacts your partners, it impacts the people around you. Without understanding how that impacts other people, we spent the first 6 days, 7 days of this thing talking about being self-aware in a way that defining your own emotions. Yesterday we did big like 10 exercises to increase your own self-awareness. And now we're kind of moving into being aware of how you're affecting other people. And if you're not aware of this stuff, miscommunication runs rampant, your needs don't get met or they don't even get addressed, and you can get frustrated trying to bid for attention or bid for your needs to get met without having anything in what you view as reciprocity. But if you're not communicating clearly and there's no clarity in the way that you're getting them across, it's very difficult for other people to meet your needs. And the frustration, the miscommunication, all that stuff can kind of take center stage in your head, and then you don't have as much agency. You don't have as much control over what you can do in your behavior that can make the situation better. So in here, we're going to explore the top 10 signs that you might lack self-awareness in your relationship, and more importantly, how to turn things around. What did I write here? We got, definition of self-awareness. Yeah, understanding your emotions, triggers, behaviors, and their effect on your partner, right? So this is what we've been covering for the last 7 days. If you haven't seen the entire series, you can start at 1 and go all the way through. We talked about empathy. We talked about how it helps your communication, helps you get your needs met. And so let's just jump into the 10 signs and give some examples and then close it out. First sign you lack First sign you lack self-awareness in your relationship is you blame your partner for everything. If you don't have an awareness of what you need, you tend to externalize your problem. You don't have any responsibility or personal ownership of getting your own needs met, and then you look outward elsewhere to get everybody to meet your needs. And if you're not clear on them, it's very difficult for people to do that, right? If you focus on all of your partner's faults without focusing on your own behavior, what kind of caused them, you're at a disadvantage. Not because they're not fucking up and they're not, making mistakes or whatever, because all humans do, and relationships are inherently between two people who don't have the same worldview, right? We're not attracted to people who think exactly like us. So we usually hook up with people who complement our strengths. And so if somebody is like really out of organization and chaotic and their level of big five orderliness is super low, usually we're going to hook up with somebody who has that covered, right? And so we're going to see the world from two different ways. And if you start blaming them for everything, then you don't get to see what you're adding or subtracting from the efficacy in the scenario. And because you don't own that, then you can't make behavioral changes or mindset shifts in order to make that situation better for both of you. As long as you're waiting for somebody else to fix a problem with no introspection on yourself on how you can get the problem fixed or how you can avoid having that problem come up in the future, you're always going to be at the mercy or at the effect of that other person. And if you blame your partner for everything and you have no interest in fixing it from your end, you're just waiting on them, and you're obviously going to be disappointed and frustrated because their priorities are going to be different. Sign number 2. Sign you lack self-awareness in relationships. 2, you struggle to identify your emotions. If you can't name or understand your feelings, that can lead to a major amount of miscommunication in your relationship. If you're like, I feel sad because you won't this or that, right? Like you don't give me enough physical intimacy, so I feel sad, right? Initially, you put people you'll put your partner on a, what do you call it? Defensive. You'll put your partner on a defensive tip if you start blaming them for your feelings being sad, right? But if you can be more specific in identifying your emotions and say something along the lines of, I was excited and hoping for a deeper connection with you, and I've been working hard all week, and then I thought in the weekend we were going to spend some time together. Spending time with you makes me really happy, and then when you didn't prioritize that, it made me feel like I was just super disappointed because that's what I was looking forward to it. And that is much more specific, and you can create a lot of empathy on the other person's end by explaining things in specific, realistic terms so that they can kind of identify without feeling like they're to blame right away, even if they are. Like, even if they're neglecting you and you feel like going after something that they're holding back, if you attack them like that, they're going to be defensive and it's going to have difficulties in the communication. You might as well take the human response take the human viewpoint of like, I'm feeling this way because of these certain circumstances, and they can be like, I would probably feel that way too in that space. There, it invites them to in the conversation, so you can kind of co-create a solution together. And the blaming sort of just makes them super defensive. So the more specific you're able to make your emotional communication, the better or the more likely somebody else is going to be able to relate with it and track your experience with theirs and come together to co-create a new solution with you. Third sign you probably lack self-awareness in your relationships is you frequently interrupt or dominate the conversation. We're talking about self-awareness and how your partner is feeling, right, and how your partner is receiving what you're saying, how your partner is perceiving you, or not necessarily self-awareness like from the first 6 days where you're just like, oh yeah, internal reflection. If you frequently interrupt or dominate the conversation, it can make them feel like you are not listening to them, and you won't get any reciprocity out of that. We did a whole series on active listening last year, back when Jax was working with us, and I think I have to reshoot some of those videos because he kind of since moved on and wanted to scrub his name from this type of content. But yeah, I'll go over it. I'll do an active listening sheet at some point. But if you are interrupting your partner mid-sentence, or you're interrupting their opinions because you think that what you have to say is more important than theirs, very often they're going to feel slighted. They're going to feel offended, or they're going to feel like they're not heard. And that's going to create a dissonance or a lack of connection between you two. And if you're unaware that you're doing that and they're feeling that way because you're just busy trying to get your point across and your ego is trying to justify itself, you're going to encounter problems in your relationship because you're not aware that they are feeling unheard or not listened to. And some people, in their personality types and their trauma, they won't fight you, right? Very often, I had a partner. She was super domineering, right? She had to control everything, and she would very often just run me over in all sorts of contexts, and I would just sort of sit back from my anxiously attached style and just be like, okay, well, now I see who you are. And if this keeps happening, I'm going to have to adapt myself so that I don't feel the pain of that and whatever. And then eventually we got to this head in our relationship where we weren't like connecting. And she's like, "You never told me any of this stuff." And I'm like, "Because you just keep fucking yelling at me. Why the hell am I going to tell you if I didn't feel listened to?" And she's like, "That's dumb. I didn't know. So whatever." And I was busy like trying to appease and accommodate and people please, and she was busy just running about her own path without checking in with me to see if I had any equanimity if my thoughts were important. And that was partially her fault for just running with the program, and it was partially my fault for not asserting myself. And it caused enough trauma in our relationship that we did not decide to carry on together. And I learned a lot from that thing. It's like, oh shit, I should probably step up and stand for my own values and stuff. But both of us were kind of in the wrong there, and we benefited by ending the relationship and being able to find other partners that were more compatible. But we also failed in the relationship that we could have if we were not so young and we were not so naive about this stuff. We could have found a path together and co-create a new solution. Fourth sign that you might be not self-aware about your partner's feelings in your relationship: you avoid conflict or overreact to it. Very often, especially dismissive avoidance and fearful, anxious, they just avoid conflict. They don't have any desire to feel bad. They just want to smooth over everything, and they don't want to fight. They don't. There's too much going on in childhood, too much trauma where people got into a fight and everything got all crazy and everybody felt unsafe. Right? However, most humans disagree with each other on one thing or another. Even if we're like 99% all the same, the 1% of us that's not the same is very much in contention with other people's opinions and values and beliefs, right? And if you don't communicate that stuff, you won't find common ground in those situations, right? I'll spare you a long story about my relationship on that one, but the closer you move to more securely attached, the closer you move to being able to clearly talk about your feelings, and then get people to listen and bring it out on the table, the better you can work out problems, because you're going to disagree with somebody, and avoiding it and sweeping things under the rug doesn't help the relationship become deeper, more intimate, and more secure. It just helps keep it kind of the way it is and keeping appearances, right? Like if you I had a partner. My current partner actually. She grew up in an environment where like any bad feelings, just stuff them down. You got to keep appearances. Everybody thinks that we're doing okay. We're doing okay, and then on the inside, you're not dealing with any of the issues, right? And so when you take that strategy into adulthood, it's very difficult to grow with somebody, to get more intimacy with somebody, to trust somebody more, if you're going to just keep the same kind of, let's never have any dissonance, never disagree, that it doesn't work. And so if you are not having disagreements, if you avoid conflict, or if you overreact to conflict so it ends quickly, then you are probably not at the level of self-awareness in your relationship that's going to help it grow and thrive. Now, it may keep you safe, and if you're in an abusive, weird, neglectful relationship, perhaps it's the only thing you can do. But, I mean, you can work on your self-worth and find somebody else who matches you better. But if you're in a reasonably normal relationship and you're the one just kind of like shutting down all the conflict, then you're not going to have the opportunity to grow and be vulnerable and thrive with new relationship stuff, with new challenges, if you can't deal with the conflict between your worldviews. If you can't understand their values from a deep perspective, you won't be able to meet their needs. You won't be able to co-create solutions that create a more solid foundation for any future problems that go on. Number 6, you repeat the same relationship patterns. If you don't recognize your own habits, like they were talking about self-awareness and how it affects other people. if you keep repeating the same relationship patterns, you start dating the same douchebag over and over again. You're dating the same crazy bitch over and over and over again, and you just do the same shit. You have a familiarity there. That guy Aaron Dowdy on YouTube. He's a kind of a spiritual teacher slash. He touches into a lot of self love and self relationship concepts. Check him out. He's got a whole meditation program and stuff that's fantastic called the High Vibe Tribe. But he talks about this thing where if you continue to go over and over and over again, repeating the same things, perhaps the universe is trying to teach you a lesson over and over again. And what it has to do with is you not being aware of how you're affecting them. Sometimes you're the one constantly destroying your own foundations because your values are shaky, your perspective is shaky. But other times you're just too in your own head and you're not noticing what's going on with the other person and you're not meeting their needs at all. So they just keep leaving, right? There's an anxiously attached trope narrative that keeps happening, and it kept happening for years because I was like, everybody always abandons me, everybody always leaves me, I got this abandonment wound, and you're gonna do it too, and da 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 da. I did all that shit, and turns out that me holding back from being abandoned and not pushing to trust in the relationship and not giving my whole self into the relationship created dissonance for the other people, and so they would find a reason to leave, and I would make that reason the identity and the pain and the cross that I had to bear. And while that was a perfectly fine identity for me to have at the time, my current goals are to have good, solid, thriving relationships, and so that doesn't serve that goal. So I had to be self-aware of the fact that I was kind of pushing people away by trying to protect myself from getting them to leave. And it seems kind of paradoxical, but like once I stopped doing that, people stuck around, and I was like, "Oh, I guess the lowest common denominator was me." But yeah, so if you repeat the same relationship patterns over and over and over again, chances are what you're bringing to the relationship or what you're choosing in partners has something to do with something you're not too aware of in your own system. Number 7, you ignore your partner's emotional needs. There are plenty of relationships where you can maintain kind of a master-slave or a dom sub kind of relationship where you're kind of like you're the flip the scripter, you're the abuser, you're the totalitarian. And then a lot of people with like low self-worth or whatever, or anxiously attached people will continue to chase that and do the adore thing like Orion Terabin talks about. Dr. Orion Terabin talks about one has to be the adored, one has to be the adorer. And they're chasing, right? They're doing this thing, and then you're leading the thing, and as soon as you start going in that direction, they start running because like that's not the rule, right? A lot of relationships work this way, where you're ignoring their emotional needs, and they just kind of beg for scraps, and then you kind of like give them a little taste of whatever, and it keeps you in control, and it keeps them vying for your attention, and that works just fine. There's nothing. I wouldn't say there's nothing wrong with it, but it's a perfectly functional way to run a relationship. However, it's very difficult for that person to gain self-worth, self-efficacy, importance, right? And it makes it difficult for you to get fulfilled by somebody else by being vulnerable and allowing them to nurture you in ways that you can't nurture yourself. And it keeps your relationship from growing in deeper intimacy. And it doesn't mean that it's not a great way to run a relationship if you just like full control and you don't want to let go of some of the ego stuff, and you just need to have that dynamic. The more polarized the dynamic is, the more sticky that thing is. But your fights are going to be crazy. You're not going to solve a lot of problems during the fights. You're just going to beat somebody down to make them feel less than they did when they started the relationship with you, and they lose their entire identity and soul. And then when you guys finally break up, they have to build everything up from scratch and glow up, and then you've got to go find somebody else to fucking deal with, right? Or the other way around. If you're fucking chasing, and those people don't ever notice your needs and try to meet them at all, then you just figure that your needs are worthless and you're not good enough to deserve them. So maybe you should just try harder to deserve it, and one day, maybe you'll get everything you ever wanted. And that's, a life full of unfulfilling relationships. Not to say that your relationship should fulfill you, but you should be able to be filled. You should be able to feel fulfilled because you're fulfilling yourself in the relationship. And if you are ignoring your partner's needs, that's a signal that you are not self-aware in how your partner perceives you in your relationship. Number 8, you have trouble setting or respecting boundaries. If you're not self-aware in how you are communicating in a relationship, it's going to be difficult for you to set boundaries. It's also going to be able for you to respect boundaries from the other side. If you can't be aware of how what you're doing is overstepping somebody else's boundaries, or you're failing to communicate your own shit, they're not going to know where to stop, and you're not going to know where to stop. And you're constantly going to be offending each other and breaking trust, breaking rapport in the relationship over and over and over again. Sometimes, especially people from the anxious avoidance side, the avoidance side, they will need space. They need to feel autonomy. They need to feel, okay, I've got everything situated under control. And from the anxious side, some people will be like, I used to do this all the time. Like, I would be like, hey, we should talk about that. I don't want to leave, I don't want to go to bed angry. I don't want to leave the room without having, communicated this like adults, right? And I would push to be like, nope, we need to put this out on the table. You need to shut the fuck up and we need to figure this out together. Because if we don't figure this out together, I don't know what we're going to do with our relationship. And I'd be like, oh, I'm going to lose her if she doesn't fucking solve this with me right now. Right? And then I would do that thing, and then she would need space. She would need a time to fucking regroup for herself and be like, I need to understand these things and how I feel before I can talk to you about it and feel obligated and feel all problem solving with you. And she wouldn't communicate that, obviously. She just shut down. And I would not respect the boundary that she needed space. And I would push it, and then things would blow up, and we'd go into some crazy ass fucking, blaming and hating on each other that didn't need to happen, because I could have just been like, all right, very clearly, I would like to finish out the conversation, and I would like to talk about this. I'm going to table this till, next Friday or whatever. And I'm going to hit you back up on Friday. Please, over the week, think about the stuff. And what are your thoughts on that? And we can talk about it like adults then. Thank you. I love you. Bye. And that would kind of solve my need to communicate and my need to set boundaries and my desire for us to work through the problem verbally like adults. And it would also solve her need for space, because she'd be like, okay, I have he's going to leave me alone, and I'm going to figure this stuff out, and then I can come back when I'm ready. And that works a lot better in creating rapport and not re-offending each other over and over again. And doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work to fix all the problems in your relationship, but it works a lot better than being like, no, do this now, woman, and then like she begrudgingly comes to some sort of agreement that she doesn't yet fully know, right? She would say something like, I need to figure this out myself. And I would ignore that and be like, no, if you do that, then you're going to go find something that you hate me about, and then I'm going to come back and have to do all the shit out of this house, right? And I'd be like, from the anxiously attached side, I'd be like, no, we need to solve it now, otherwise I'm going to feel anxious for the next 5 days, right? Which was also valid, but because I'm kind of the leader in the emotional communication of the relationship, it's my job, my duty to own my part and do what I can to respect her boundaries, and yet set guide rails on them, like, we are going to have this conversation at some point. Please think about it, rather than flipping out and trying to get things done my way. Right? The more self-aware I become, the more effective I am at that communication. The more effective I am at making my relationship grow and thrive and create trust and rapport and build cool shit. Number 9, thing you may be doing, signs that you may lack self-awareness in your relationship. You feel unfulfilled, but you cannot explain why. This is a classic self-awareness lack. Like, if you don't think about why you like things and why you're in the relationship and why you choose to continue to make concessions, or why you can choose to co-create things that you didn't necessarily want in the first place and all that stuff, if you don't introspect, if you don't think and self-reflect on why you do things in the relationship, and sometimes you go, oh, it just feels better. Well, it feels better because of trauma, bro. Like more often, if you can figure out why you like stuff, you can ask for it to be met better, faster, more efficiently. And if you're unsure of what's missing in the relationship because you're not busy thinking about what's missing in the relationship, then you can't articulate your needs to the other person, and then you continuously feel dissatisfied. And you're constantly chasing, or you're constantly hoping it'll get better, or you're constantly blaming them for shit. And it doesn't help build the trust and rapport in the relationship. You might as well just be fighting with any random person. Just because this one sucks your dick every once in a while doesn't mean that you're having a healthy, thriving relationship. If you're feeling unfulfilled and you can't explain why, it's because you don't know what fulfills you, or you don't know how that person can help. And both of those things, if you understood and were able to articulate them, you could ask for the help you needed. And if the other person said, I can't, you could move on with reasonable certainty that you could find something that you did want, right? And if they tried to help you meet your needs, then that's the deeper, more need-fulfilling intimacy we were talking about earlier. So if you feel unfulfilled and you can't explain why, that's the ninth reason that you, or the ninth sign that you may be missing self-awareness in the relationship, and you can fix it doing some of those things that we talked about. Aha! The power just went out because there's massive wildfires and winds are like 60 miles an hour outside. Anyway, came back on. Most of my shit's on batteries, so. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, if you feel dissatisfied, you're unable to articulate it, you can fix those things by doing self-awareness exercises like we did in yesterday's video. There's 10 exercises in there you can do in a day. They'll all take a minute and a half or whatever, and you can get more self-aware and figure out why you think the way you think, why you value the things you value, and why you behave the way you behave, and you'll be able to articulate it much better to your partner or your future partners, and you will have a much better time trying to develop intimacy. Down to number 10, the 10th sign. You may be lacking self-awareness in your relationship. It's you struggle to apologize or take accountability. Very often, you'll get to a point where you don't want to blame the other person. And so you sort of take it all on yourself. And you're like, okay, this is my fault, this is my fault, this is my fault. Extreme ownership, the way Jocko says, right? You're going to go ahead and you'll be like this. But you're dealing with all this stuff in yourself, and you're saying, hey, look, I don't need to apologize for shit. I keep moving. This conflict is happening, but we're just going to keep pushing forward, and we don't need to do the. It's another conflict avoidance thing where you don't apologize. You don't have to feel vulnerable. You don't feel accountable for the things that you have to say in the relationship, things that you've done to hurt other people. And very often you'll sublimate it. And like one of my partners, she would have a big argument, and then come to me and be like, really, really nice, and just kind of let it blow over. And if I didn't bring it up, she would just buy me random shit and be like, see, I'm not mad anymore, right? But there was no accountability on her end. There was no apology. There was no let's talk about this thing and the ways I messed up and how I'd like you to expect me to treat you in the future. She wouldn't do that stuff. She would just kind of let it blow over. If she was very famous for, very famous. She was very I thought it was famous. I saw it a lot where she would say, I'm sorry you feel that way. Whenever I was trying to express an emotional need. I'm like, well, wait, you want to do anything about it? He's like, yeah, well, you're going to have to work that out. I'm like, okay. And then from that anxiously attached side, I was like, man, I'm fucked up, man. Every time I ask for something, it's just not good enough. And it brought my self-esteem down this weird, stupid downward spiral. And I was like, well, maybe I'm just not worth paying attention to. I would pay somebody attention if they asked me this thing. And I was all super weak, and I had no agency. I had no ability to push my relationship in a direction that I wanted it to go. I didn't know ability to lead that thing because my partner was not taking accountability or apologizing for anything she had to say. She would sublimate it to something else, and it left me in this kind of like limbo of like, does she actually want to fix her behavior, or is she just like to buy me shit when she feels guilty, right? Like, I don't. Am I doing well enough? Am I expecting the wrong things? Right? And it kept the intimacy of our relationship from growing. And like I said, all of these strategies are perfectly fine for avoiding trauma and avoiding conflict and not having issues. But they're not great for thriving. They're not great for creating an environment where you can co-create something new that is bigger than both of you. A relationship that can last, can encompass both of you when you're feeling up and down, and you're getting thrown about by all the situations in life. I talked a few days ago about how life is going to be suffering, and if you can face it together, trusting in each other's strengths, you're going to have a lot better time dealing with the suffering of life. If not, and you just want to protect yourself and you want to make sure that you're just not feeling as much anxiety as you normally do, then yeah, you can use your same unaware coping strategies that you've been using for years. And if you don't want to grow and go deeper in intimacy, that's fine. Stay where you're at. Use your existing strategies. It seems to work well. If you do want to grow deeper in intimacy and you want to be more connected and you want to be able to rely on each other in vulnerable ways, then look at the ways, these 10 signs that you may be not self-aware in relationships, and figure out what you can do to become more self-aware. Luckily enough, for these 31 days in January, I am talking all sorts of shit about how to be more self-aware and what it does for your relationships. If you haven't seen number 1, go back to number 1. I think it's number 7 or 8, and you can see all the lessons on that stuff on YouTube, and it's all part of a big online course and book thing I'm releasing at the end of the month. So if you want to look at the pre-order and all that stuff for that, the link is in the description below. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow for the next episode, and I hope I don't burn down over here. Have a great time. I will see you tomorrow, and until then, stay awesome.